Tyler Brooks stared out the window of the spacecraft and watched as stars streaked past in ribbons of light, and his hands gripped the armrest a bit too tightly, and he tried to keep his breathing steady. Beside him, Kayla noticed his tension, and she reached over to place her slender hand on his, and her skin was warm and smooth, and her violet eyes met his with gentle understanding. "You are nervous," she said softly, and it was not a question. Tyler managed a weak smile, and he nodded. "And is it that obvious?" Kayla laughed, and the sound reminded him of wind chimes on a summer breeze, and very obvious, she teased, "But do not worry, and my family will love you." That was exactly what worried him, and Tyler had met plenty of families before, but never one that lived on another planet, and never one where the family members had pointed ears and silver hair and kept dragons as companions. He glanced behind them to where 2 dragons rested in the cargo hold, and Vex, the larger one, had scales that shimmered between silver and blue, and his eyes glowed with an intelligence that made Tyler uncomfortable. And Nyx was smaller with darker scales, and she seemed more playful, but no less intimidating. "How much longer?" Tyler asked. "About 2 hours," Kayla replied. "And then we will reach the portal gate, and after that only 30 minutes to my homeworld." Tyler nodded and tried to relax, but his mind kept racing, and he had met Kayla 6 months ago when his engineering crew was assigned to repair a damaged observation station near the edge of explored space, and she had arrived with a diplomatic envoy, and their eyes had met across a crowded conference room, and something had just clicked. Their relationship had developed quickly, and maybe too quickly by human standards, but Tyler had never felt so certain about anything in his life. And Kayla was brilliant and kind and funny in ways that transcended species barriers, and when she asked him to come meet her family, he had said yes, without hesitation. Now, though, he was having second thoughts. "What if they do not like me?" Tyler asked suddenly. Kayla turned to face him fully, and her expression was serious. "And Tyler, they will like you, because I love you, and that is enough for my family." Tyler felt his chest tighten in a good way, and they had said those words before, but hearing them now on the way to her homeworld made them feel more real and more permanent. "I love you too," he whispered. The rest of the journey passed in comfortable silence, and Tyler dozed off at some point, and when he woke, the ship was approaching a massive ring structure floating in space, and the portal gate was enormous and made of materials that seemed to absorb and reflect light at the same time. "Prepare for transit," Kayla announced, and she pressed several buttons on the control panel. The ship accelerated toward the center of the ring, and Tyler felt his stomach drop as they passed through, and for a moment everything went white and silent. And then they emerged into a new star system. Before them hung a planet that took Tyler's breath away, and it was covered in shades of green and blue and white, but the colors seemed more vibrant than Earth and more alive. And 3 moons orbited at different distances, and their surfaces gleaming like pearls. "Welcome to Ethermore," Kayla said, and her voice filled with pride, "and welcome to my home." As they descended through the atmosphere, Tyler pressed his face to the window, and the landscape below was breathtaking, and vast forests stretched to the horizon, and crystal-clear rivers wound through valleys, and mountains rose in the distance with peaks that glowed faintly even in daylight. But what caught his attention most were the dragons, and they were everywhere, and some soared through the clouds in pairs, while others rested on cliffsides or glided over the forests, and Tyler counted at least 20 in his field of vision. "So many," he breathed. Kayla smiled. "And dragons are part of our culture," she explained, "and every family bonds with at least one, and they are our companions and protectors and friends." The ship landed at a platform near a city that looked like something from a fantasy painting, and buildings rose in graceful spirals, and bridges connected towers in elegant arcs, and everything seemed to be made from a white stone that gleamed in the sunlight as the landing ramp lowered. Tyler took a deep breath, and Kayla took his hand and squeezed it gently. "Ready?" she asked. "As I will ever be," Tyler replied. They walked down the ramp with Vex and Nyx following behind, and a group of people waited at the base, and Tyler recognized them from video calls as Kayla's family. Her mother, Celera, stood in the center, and tall and regal with silver hair that fell to her waist, and her father, Theron, was beside her, and his presence commanding. But his eyes were warm, and Kayla's three sisters stood in the line, and Mira, the eldest, watched Tyler with open curiosity, and Lily smiled brightly, and Nina, the youngest, looked shy. Behind them stood several other figures and advisors or family friends, Tyler guessed, and all of them studying the human who had captured their princess's heart. Kayla led Tyler forward, and she held her head high. "And mother, father, and sisters and I present Tyler Brooks of Earth and the man I intend to marry." Solara stepped forward, and her gaze swept over Tyler from head to toe, and for a long moment she said nothing, and Tyler felt sweat forming on his palms. Then she smiled, and it transformed her entire face. "And welcome, Tyler Brooks," she said, and her voice carrying authority and warmth in equal measure. "And any man who makes my daughter this happy is welcome in our home." Tyler felt tension drain from his shoulders. "And thank you," he managed, "and I am honored to be here." Theron approached next, and he was taller than Tyler expected, and his handshake was firm but not crushing. "And you have courage, human," he said, "and not many would travel so far to meet their beloved's family." Tyler met his eyes. "And Kayla is worth any distance, sir." Theron laughed in a deep rumbling sound. "And good answer, and come, and you must be tired from your journey." The family began moving toward the palace, and Tyler walking between, Kayla and her mother and the sisters chattering excitedly around them, and Vex and Nyx padded behind, and their claws clicking on the stone pathway. As they walked, Tyler noticed people stopping to stare, and word of his arrival had clearly spread, and he was probably the first human many of them had ever seen. Kayla noticed his discomfort and squeezed his hand. "And they are just curious," she whispered. "And humans are rare here." Tyler nodded, but he could not shake the feeling that something important was about to happen, and something that would change his life forever. He had no idea how right he was. The palace interior was even more impressive than the exterior, and Tyler followed Kayla through corridors lined with tapestries that seemed to move in non-existent breezes, and floors were made of smooth stone that glowed softly beneath their feet, and windows opened to impossible views of forests and mountains. Kayla's mother, Solara, led them to a grand dining hall where a feast had been prepared, and the table stretched nearly 20 feet and was covered with dishes Tyler did not recognize, and fruits that sparkled like gems and breads that smelled like honey and flowers. "Please sit," Solara gestured to chairs near the head of the table. "And we have prepared foods that should be safe for human consumption, and Kayla told us of your dietary needs." Tyler sat gratefully, and his legs were tired from the journey, and Kayla took the seat beside him, and her hand found his under the table and gave it a reassuring squeeze. The family gathered around the table, and servants appeared with more dishes, and Tyler noticed they all had the same pointed ears and ethereal beauty as Kayla's family, but their clothing was simpler, and their manner more reserved. Theron raised a glass filled with pale blue liquid, and to new family he announced, and to bridges built between worlds. Everyone raised their glasses, and Tyler lifted his carefully, and he sniffed the liquid cautiously before taking a small sip, and it tasted like starlight and moonbeams if such things had flavor, and it was sweet and cool and left a pleasant tingling sensation as they ate. Kayla's sisters bombarded Tyler with questions, and Mira wanted to know about Earth's governments, and Lily asked about human music and art, and Nina shyly inquired about what he did for work. "I'm an engineer," Tyler explained, "and I work on space stations and ships and maintenance mostly, but sometimes new construction." Mira leaned forward, and her eyes bright. "And so you understand complex systems, and you can repair things that are broken." Tyler nodded. "And that is most of what I do, actually, and finding problems and fixing them." The three sisters exchanged meaningful glances, and Tyler noticed, but before he could ask about it, Theron spoke. "Tell me, Tyler, and what are your intentions with my daughter?" The table fell silent, and all eyes turned to Tyler, and even the servants paused in their work. Tyler set down his fork and met Theron's gaze directly. "And I intend to marry her, sir, and to spend my life making her happy, and to be worthy of the trust she has placed in me." "And if our people disapprove?" Solara asked gently. "And if they say a human cannot marry into our royal family?" "Then I will prove them wrong," Tyler said firmly. "And I will show them that love does not care about species, or planets or traditions." Kayla's hand tightened on his, and her eyes were shining. Theron studied Tyler for a long moment, and then he smiled. "And you have my blessing, human, and anyone with that kind of determination is worthy of my daughter." The tension Broken conversation resumed, and Tyler felt like he had passed some important test. After the meal, Kayla offered to show Tyler the palace gardens, and they walked through doors that opened onto a terrace overlooking acres of carefully tended plants, and trees and flowers that glowed softly in the fading light. In the distance, Tyler could see dragons settling down for the evening, and their forms silhouetted against the setting sun. "It is beautiful," Tyler said, and taking in the view, Kayla moved closer to him and her shoulder brushing his. "And I am glad you think so. And this is where I spent most of my childhood, and these gardens have always been my sanctuary." They walked along stone paths, between flower beds, and the air was filled with scents Tyler could not name, and sweet and spicy and clean all at once. Kayla stopped beside a fountain where water danced in patterns that seemed to defy gravity. "And Tyler," she said softly, "and there is something I need to tell you." Tyler's heart skipped, and he turned to face her. "And what is it?" "My sisters want to speak with you tomorrow," Kayla said, and her expression serious. "And they have a request, and it is unusual, and perhaps strange by human standards." Tyler frowned. "And what kind of request?" Kayla took both his hands in hers. "And I cannot tell you now, and they asked me not to. But I want you to know that whatever you decide, I will support you, and no one will think less of you regardless of your answer." That did not sound ominous at all, Tyler thought, but he nodded and, "Okay, and I will listen to what they have to say." Kayla relaxed slightly. "And thank you. And I know this is all very overwhelming, and a new planet and my family. And now mysterious requests." Tyler pulled her into a hug. "And I knew what I was signing up for when I agreed to come here, and, well, mostly anyway." She laughed against his chest. "And tomorrow will make more sense, and I promise." They stood together as the sky darkened, and the 3 moons began to rise, and each one casting a different colored glow over the landscape, and Tyler felt Kayla's warmth against him, and the strange rightness of being here with her. Movement caught his eye, and Vex landed on a nearby terrace, and his massive form casting shadows in the moonlight, and the dragon looked at them and then seemed to nod before taking off again. "Do the dragons approve of me?" Tyler asked. Kayla tilted her head back to look at him. "And Vex bonded with me when I was 7 years old, and he knows my heart better than anyone. And if he did not approve, you would not be here." "That is reassuring," Tyler said dryly. They returned to the palace as stars began appearing in the alien sky, and Kayla showed Tyler to his guest quarters, and the room was large and comfortable, with a bed that looked impossibly soft and windows that opened to views of the gardens. "Sleep well," Kayla said from the doorway, "and tomorrow will be an important day." Tyler watched her leave, and then he moved to the window and looked out at the unfamiliar constellations, and somewhere out there beyond those stars was Earth and his old life and everything he had known. But here was Kayla and her family, and a future he had never imagined. He had no idea what her sisters wanted to discuss, but he knew it was important, and important enough that Kayla was worried about his reaction. Tyler turned away from the window and prepared for bed and whatever tomorrow brought. He would face it, and he had come too far to turn back now. As he drifted off to sleep, he thought he heard dragon wings in the distance, and the sound both comforting and strange in equal measure. Tyler woke to sunlight streaming through his window, and for a moment he forgot where he was. And then memory returned, and the alien planet and Kayla's family, and the mysterious meeting ahead. A servant knocked softly and brought breakfast on a silver tray, and bread and fruit and something that looked like eggs but tasted sweeter. And Tyler ate while watching dragons soar past his window and their scales catching the morning light. Kayla arrived as he finished eating, and she wore formal robes today, and deep blue with silver embroidery, and her hair was pulled back in an intricate braid. "The meeting is in an hour," she said, and her voice quiet. "And are you ready, as I will ever be?" Tyler replied, and he stood and smoothed his clothes. "And what should I expect?" Kayla moved closer and took his hands. "And my sisters will explain everything, and just listen with an open mind, and remember that you are free to say no." That did not make him feel better. But Tyler nodded, and they walked through the palace corridors together, and servants bowed as they passed, and Tyler felt the weight of countless eyes following them. They entered a private chamber where Kayla's 3 sisters waited, and the room was circular with windows looking out over the city, and Mira stood near a table covered with what looked like technical equipment, and Lily sat in a chair, and her expression warm but serious, and Nina stood by the window, and her hands clasped nervously. "Tyler Brooks," Mira began, and stepping forward, "and thank you for agreeing to meet with us." Tyler glanced at Kayla, who gave him an encouraging nod. "And of course," and Kayla said, "you had something important to discuss." The three sisters exchanged looks, and Lily spoke next. "And what we are about to tell you is known only to our family and a few trusted advisors, and it is not public knowledge because we did not want to cause panic." Tyler's stomach tightened. "And panic about what?" "Our species is dying," Nina said quietly, and her voice barely above a whisper. Tyler stared at them. "And what do you mean dying?" Mira moved to the table and picked up a device that projected images in the air and charts and graphs and genetic sequences, and for the past 1,000 years our population has been declining, and we have fewer children each generation, and those who are born are often weak or sick. The images showed population numbers dropping steadily over centuries, and Tyler felt his chest tighten as he understood the scale of the problem. "We have tried everything," Lily continued, "and genetic therapies and medical interventions and even magical solutions, and nothing has worked, and we are running out of time. There are only a few thousand of our kind left across all our worlds," Mira said, and her voice heavy, "and at current rates we will be extinct within 5 generations. Tyler looked at Kayla, and she met his eyes with a mixture of sadness and hope. "And why are you telling me this?" "Because you might be our salvation," Nina said, and stepping away from the window, Tyler frowned. "And I do not understand, and I am just a human engineer." "Exactly," Mira said. "And you are human, and when Kayla brought samples of your DNA to our scientists for compatibility testing, and they discovered something remarkable. Lily activated another projection, and this one showing 2 genetic sequences side by side, and your human genetics are not just compatible with ours, Tyler, and they are complementary, and where our genome has weakened, yours is strong, and your genetic diversity could restore what we have lost." Tyler felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "And wait, and you are saying, we are asking if you would be willing to donate genetic material," Mira said clearly, "and so that we and others of our kind might have children and offspring that would carry both human and elven traits." Tyler's mind raced, and they wanted him too, and with all of them, and with, "Not in the way you are thinking," Lily said quickly, and seeing his expression, "and our medical technology is advanced, and we can create offspring without physical intimacy, and it would all be done in controlled laboratory conditions," Nina added softly, "and you would simply provide samples and nothing more." Tyler sat down heavily in the nearest chair, and this was not at all what he had expected. "And let me make sure I understand. And you want me to help you have children and genetically?" "Yes," Mira confirmed. "And not just us, but potentially hundreds of families across our worlds, and families who have lost hope of continuing their bloodlines. And these children," Tyler said slowly, "and they would be half human." "Yes," Lily replied, "and they would bridge our 2 species, and they would have the strength of humanity and the gifts of our people." Tyler looked at Kayla again, and she moved to stand beside him and her hand on his shoulder. "And this is real?" he asked. "And your entire species is dying?" Kayla nodded, and her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "And I did not tell you before because I wanted you to come here for me and not out of pity or obligation, but now you need to know the truth." Tyler stood and paced to the window, and below he could see the beautiful city and the dragons and the people going about their daily lives, and all of them unaware that their civilization was ending. "How long have you known?" Tyler asked. "Since before we met," Kayla admitted, "and our scientists have been searching for compatible species for decades, and when I met you, and when I felt what I felt, and I had to know if it was possible, and so I took samples from a glass you used, and I am sorry for the deception." Tyler should have been angry, but he understood, and she had been trying to save her people, and how could he fault that? What would happen to the children, Tyler asked, and turning back to the sisters, and would they know about me? Mira stepped forward, and that would be your choice, and we can arrange it however you wish. And some donors prefer anonymity, while others want to be involved in their children's lives. Tyler thought about Earth and about human history, and about how many times humanity had faced extinction and had survived through cooperation and adaptation and innovation. "And if I say no," he asked, "then we respect your decision," Lily said firmly. And we will continue searching for other solutions, and you and Kayla would still have our blessing to marry. Nina added, and we would never force this, and it must be freely given, or not. At all, Tyler closed his eyes and thought about the weight of what they were asking, and hundreds of children and hundreds of lives that would exist because of him, and or not exist if he refused. But he also thought about the families who had lost hope and the parents who wanted children but could not have them, and the civilization that would disappear from the universe if something did not change. How much time do I have to decide? Tyler asked. Mira smiled sadly. And as much as you need. And this is not a decision to make lightly. Tyler nodded and, can I think about it and maybe ask some questions later? Of course, Kayla said, and squeezing his shoulder, and take all the time you need. The meeting ended and Tyler walked through the palace gardens in a daze, and his mind spinning with possibilities and implications and responsibilities he had never imagined. Vex found him there, and the great dragon landing silently beside him. You are troubled. The dragon rumbled, and his voice resonating in Tyler's mind. Tyler looked up at the massive creature. And I have been asked to help save your species, and it is a lot to process. Vex lowered his head until one enormous eye was level with Tyler's face. And what does your heart tell you? That is the problem, Tyler admitted, and my heart says yes. But my head is not sure if I am ready for this. The dragon made a sound like distant thunder, and no one is ever ready for greatness, but sometimes we must rise to meet it anyway. Tyler spent the rest of the day wandering the palace grounds and trying to organize his thoughts, and everywhere he looked he saw reminders of what was at stake, and children playing in the gardens, and their laughter bright and pure and elderly, couples walking arm in arm and their love evident in every gesture, and young families with hope in their eyes. Kayla found him as the sun began to set, and she sat beside him on a stone bench overlooking the valley, and for a while, neither of them spoke. I should have told you sooner, she said finally, and before you came here. Tyler shook his head and no. And I understand why you did not. And this is not the kind of thing you drop into casual conversation. She smiled sadly and still. And I hate that you feel pressured. I do not feel pressured, Tyler said, and surprised to find it was true, and I feel. And responsible maybe. And like I am holding something precious and fragile, and I am terrified of dropping it. Kayla took his hand, and you do not have to carry this alone. Tyler squeezed her fingers and tell me about them and the children who would be born and what would their lives be like. Kayla's expression softened, and they would be loved and cherished, and every family who receives this gift would treasure their child beyond measure, and they would grow up knowing both cultures and both worlds, and they would be proof that different species can come together and create something beautiful. And they would be healthy. Tyler asked, our scientists believe so, Kayla replied, and the genetic modeling shows they would have none of the weaknesses that plague our current population, and they would be stronger and more resilient and better able to survive. Tyler thought about that and about children running through these gardens centuries from now, and children who would exist because of a choice he made today. What do you want me to do? Tyler asked. And turning to face Kayla, she met his eyes steadily. And I want you to do what feels right to you and not what you think I want or what my family expects, and this is too important for anything other than complete honesty. Tyler stood and paced a few steps, and the evening air was cool on his skin, and I keep thinking about my own parents and about how much they wanted children and how happy they were when I was born. And every person deserves that chance. Do they not? Kayla rose and moved to his side. And yes, they do. And I think about what it means to be human. Tyler continued, and we are not perfect, and we make mistakes, and we fight, and we hurt each other, but we also help, and we build, and we reach across impossible distances to connect with others. And maybe this is what we do best. What is that? Kayla asked softly. We adapt, Tyler said, and we find solutions. And we do not give up even when things seem impossible, and maybe being human means saying yes when others need help, and even when it is scary. Kayla's breath caught, and are you saying? Tyler turned to her and took both her hands, and I'm saying yes, and I will do it, and I will help your people. Tears spilled down Kayla's cheeks, and she pulled him into a tight embrace, and thank you, she whispered. And thank you, thank you, thank you. Tyler held her and felt the weight of his decision settle over him, and it was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "But I have conditions," Tyler said, and pulling back to look at her. "Anything," Kayla replied. "The children need to know about me," Tyler said firmly, "and not as some anonymous donor, but as a person and someone who cared enough to help, and they should know about Earth and about humans, and about both sides of their heritage." Kayla nodded eagerly, "And of course, and we would not have it any other way, and if they ever want to meet me," Tyler continued, "and if they have questions or need someone to talk to, and that door has to be open." "Yes," Kayla agreed, "and absolutely, yes. And one more thing," Tyler said, and his voice softer now, "and our children come first, and when we decide to start a family and they get priority over everything else." Kayla laughed through her tears, and there was never any doubt about that. They walked back to the palace hand in hand, and word had apparently spread because Kayla's sisters were waiting in the main hall, and along with their parents and several other people Tyler did not recognize. "Tyler Brooks," Celera said, "and stepping forward, and my daughter told us of your decision, and we are forever in your debt." Tyler felt his face flush, "And I just want to help." "You are doing far more than that," Theron replied, and his voice gruff with emotion, "and you are giving us hope." Mira approached and pulled Tyler into an unexpected hug, and, "Thank you," she whispered, "and you will never know what this means to our people." Lily and Nina followed, and each embracing him in turn, and Tyler felt overwhelmed by their gratitude. "The scientist will need to meet with you," Mira said, and stepping back and to explain the process and to ensure everything is done correctly, but there is no rush, and we can begin whenever you are ready. Tyler nodded, and let us start soon. And the sooner we begin, the sooner families can start hoping again. The next few days passed in a blur, and Tyler met with doctors and scientists who explained the genetic procedures in detail, and he signed documents and gave samples and answered endless questions about his family medical history. Kayla stayed by his side through all of it, and her presence a constant source of comfort and strength. On the fourth day, Tyler sat in a medical facility while a doctor examined the genetic samples, and the woman's eyes were bright with excitement as she studied the data. "This is remarkable," she breathed, "and the compatibility is even better than we initially thought, and the first generation of children should be completely healthy and possibly even stronger than pure humans, or pure elves." Tyler felt something loosen in his chest, "And that is good news then, better than good," the doctor replied, "and this could save our species." Word spread quickly through the city, and Tyler found himself approached by strangers who wanted to shake his hand or thank him, and it was uncomfortable and humbling in equal measure. One evening, an elderly woman stopped him in the palace gardens, and she was frail and leaning heavily on a cane, and she looked up at Tyler with eyes that had seen centuries. "My granddaughter has been trying to conceive for 20 years, she said, and her voice cracking, and the doctor said it was impossible and that her genetics were too damaged, but now, there is hope." Tyler felt his throat tighten. "And I hope she gets her child." The woman reached up and touched his cheek with a wrinkled hand, "And you are a blessing, young human, and you are a gift from the stars themselves." After she left, Tyler sat on the bench for a long time and thinking about the weight of what he had agreed to and the lives that would be forever changed. Kayla found him there, and she sat close, and her warmth comforting. Having second thoughts, she asked gently. "No," Tyler replied, "and just understanding what it really means. And I am going to have hundreds of children and hundreds of lives that will be connected to mine in some way." Kayla rested her head on his shoulder. "And they will all know your name, and they will all understand what you did for them." Tyler looked up at the 3 moons rising over the horizon, and somewhere out there were families waiting for news, and couples who had given up hope, and children who did not yet exist but would soon. He thought about the human capacity for compassion, and for reaching across impossible divides, and for doing difficult things because they were right. Maybe Vex had been correct, and maybe no one was ever ready for greatness, but sometimes you had to try anyway. 6 months had passed since Tyler made his decision, and the first children were about to be born. And Tyler stood in the Palace Medical Center with Kayla beside him, and his heart pounding as doctors moved efficiently through the birthing chambers. The first family to receive a child was a couple named Sarah and Aldrich, and they had been trying to conceive for 30 years, and their genetic profiles had been deemed incompatible. But with Tyler's contribution, everything had changed. Through a viewing window, Tyler watched as doctors handed a tiny bundle to Sarah, and the woman's face transformed with wonder and joy as she looked down at her newborn daughter. "She is perfect," Sarah breathed, and tears streaming down her face, "and she is absolutely perfect." Aldrich wrapped his arms around his wife and child, and his own eyes wet. "And thank you," he mouthed toward the window. "And thank you." Tyler felt his own throat tighten, and he looked away and tried to compose himself. And Kayla squeezed his hand. "You gave them that," she whispered, "and you made that moment possible." Over the next week, 12 more children were born, and each one healthy and strong, and each one bringing immeasurable joy to families who had lost hope. Tyler met each family and watched as they held their babies with trembling hands and disbelieving smiles, and every meeting left him feeling humbled and awed by what they had accomplished together. The children were beautiful, and they had characteristics of both species, and some had pointed ears and human eye colors, and others had human features, but with the ethereal grace of the elves, and each one was unique and perfect in their own way. News of the successful births spread across the planet and then to other elven worlds, and suddenly Tyler found himself at the center of something much larger than he had imagined. Requests poured in from families across known space, and couples who had given up on having children now had hope again, and the Palace Council worked to organize the program and to ensure everything was done ethically and carefully. Tyler sat through meetings with officials and doctors and family representatives, and the scope of what they were building became clear. And this was not just about a few children, but about the future of an entire species. One afternoon, Tyler and Kayla visited Sarah and Aldrich's home to see how they were adjusting to parenthood, and the baby girl named Arya slept peacefully in her mother's arms, and her tiny fist curled against her cheek. "She has your determination," Sarah said, and smiling at Tyler, "and she grabs onto things and does not let go." Tyler felt a surge of unexpected pride. "And she is beautiful. She is ours," Aldrich said softly. "And after so many years of emptiness, and our home has life in it again." As they left, Tyler was quiet and lost in thought, and Kayla glanced at him with concern. "What are you thinking?" she asked. Tyler stopped walking and looked up at the sky where dragons soared in the distance. "And I am thinking about legacy and about what we leave behind, and I always thought my legacy would be the stations I helped build and the systems I repaired, but now it is something far greater." Kayla finished. Tyler nodded. "And hundreds of children, and maybe thousands eventually, and they will grow up and have their own children, and in a few generations there could be entire communities that exist because of this choice. It is overwhelming." Kayla agreed, but also beautiful. They walked back to the palace where Tyler's life had settled into a new routine, and he spent mornings working with scientists to optimize the genetic procedures, and afternoons meeting with families, and evenings with Kayla, planning their own wedding. The wedding was scheduled for the following month, and it would be held in the palace gardens with guests from both Earth and the elven worlds. And Tyler's parents were traveling across space to attend, and he could not wait to see them and to introduce them to Kayla and her family. One evening, Tyler received a message on his communication device, and it was from a woman named Helen, who lived on one of the outer colonies, and her baby son had been born 3 months ago, and she wanted Tyler to know that the boy was thriving and healthy and happy. She had attached a photo, and Tyler stared at the image of a chubby infant with bright eyes and a toothless smile, and the baby had pointed ears and dark hair like his mother, but his eyes were unmistakably human in their shape and depth. "His name is Lucas," she had written, "and he loves music and being outside and watching the dragons fly, and thank you for giving us our miracle." Tyler showed the message to Kayla, and she smiled. "And Lucas is a good name." Tyler saved the photo and added it to a growing collection, and he had started keeping records of all the children and their names and their families, and it felt important to remember them and to acknowledge each new life. As the months passed, the program expanded and more families participated and more children were born, and the elven population began to stabilize for the first time in centuries. Tyler met with medical researchers who showed him projections and charts and genetic analysis, and the children were indeed healthier than pure elven offspring, and they had stronger immune systems and greater genetic diversity, and better chances of long, healthy lives. But more than that, they represented hope, and they were living proof that cooperation Between species was not only possible, but beneficial. Tyler's own wedding day arrived with clear skies and perfect weather, and the palace gardens were decorated with flowers that glowed softly in the sunlight, and guests filled the terraces and pathways. Tyler stood at the altar in formal clothes that blended human and elven styles, and his parents sat in the front row and their faces beaming with pride, and Kayla's family stood opposite, and both groups coming together to witness this union. When Kayla appeared, she took Tyler's breath away, and her gown seemed to be made of starlight and moonbeams, and her silver hair was crowned with flowers, and she walked toward him with grace and certainty. The ceremony was beautiful and blending traditions from both cultures, and when they exchanged vows, Tyler spoke from his heart. "I promise to love you across any distance," she said, "and to bridge any divide, and to build a future together that honors both our peoples." Kayla's voice was steady and strong. "And I promise to stand beside you in all things, and to share in your joys and burdens, and to love you as fiercely as the dragons love the sky." When they kissed, the gathered crowd erupted in cheers, and dragons circled overhead, and their roars echoing across the valley. At the reception, Tyler found himself surrounded by families he had helped, and parents bringing their children to meet him, and babies sleeping peacefully, and carriers and toddlers taking their first wobbling steps. An older couple approached and introduced themselves as the grandparents of one of the children, and their grandson was 6 months old and already showing signs of remarkable intelligence. "We wanted to thank you personally," the grandfather said, and his voice thick with emotion. "And our family line was ending, and we had accepted that we would be the last generation, but now you have a future." Tyler finished gently. The grandmother embraced him and whispered, "And we will tell our grandson about you, and about the human who cared enough to help strangers, and he will grow up knowing that kindness can cross any boundary." As the celebration continued, Tyler found a quiet moment to stand with Kayla on a balcony overlooking the gardens, and below them, their families mingled and laughed and shared stories, and above them dragons soared in patterns that seemed almost celebratory. "We did something good," Tyler said softly. "We did something extraordinary." Kayla corrected, and she leaned against him, "And you gave my people hope, and you gave countless families the children they dreamed of. And you changed the course of history." Tyler thought about all the children who would grow up knowing 2 cultures and 2 worlds, and the bridges they would build between species. He thought about how one person's choice could ripple outward and touch thousands of lives. He thought about what it meant to be human, and to reach out, and to help, and to love beyond boundaries. And he thought about the future stretching ahead and full of possibility and wonder and the promise of countless tomorrows. Below them a child laughed, and the sound pure and bright, and Tyler smiled. This was legacy, and this was love, and this was hope, and it was only the beginning.